I'm not motivated by accolade. This just doesn't interest me. What I'm motivated by is figuring out how to help an author find their voice and realize their vision. And that drives me, and I love it.
What would the world look like if people felt like they mattered? Welcome to the Lead with Love podcast, exploring what it means to lead with love in business and life. I'm your host, Jada Selner, and in this show, I'll share meaningful conversations to help you, the creative, the entrepreneur, the world changer, reach more people, go after your dreams, and serve your community with love. I appreciate you joining me. Now, let's get cozy and start today's episode. Today, we dive deep into the craft of writing and editing a book that serves the reader first. I've been sharing a lot of behind the scenes of what it takes to write, publish, and promote a book. But one thing that I often think gets overlooked in the writing process is editing. It was actually something that I wanted to avoid and wasn't looking forward to. And I really like this quote from Mike Lee, where he says, "The first draft reveals the art. Revision reveals the artist." And there is one person that really had me fall in love with the editing process and really looking at it as art. And that is my guest today, who is AJ Harper. I had the chance to be an early reader of her book, Write a Must Read, Craft a Book That Changes Lives, including your own. I also participated in her editing retreat while I was writing my book, She Builds. And it was very meta because I followed her exact process to have my own early beta readers for my book. And it was such a helpful, insightful process. It kind of tapped into that marketing business side of my brain, but then also the creative artist side of my brain. And I truly did. I am looking forward to writing more books and to edit again, just because I feel like there is so much to learn about this creative process. And in this episode, we talk about how to help authors find their voice and also realize their vision. This is one of AJ's superpowers. She has a teacher's heart, but she is also so deeply rooted in craft and storytelling. And I fangirl a little bit listening to having this conversation with her. I'm just so inspired by her because she's so talented, but she's also so generous with how she serves and teaches and gives in the world. We'll also be talking about how writing and sharing your book is really based on the change that you want to see in the world. And she shares some really cool stuff around that. And also why it's important not to give up in the dip when marketing your book. So I'm actually going to re-listen to this podcast episode, this interview conversation. It was so helpful and refreshing for me because I'm there right now. I just got through the cycle, which I call the whoosh. I've been in the whoosh of the book release of She Builds, which is available at shebuilds.com. And I just did my last in-person, get out of my pajama pants, put on some makeup, throw a hat on my greasy hair, put on a cute dress, show up. I did a book release party on November 15th when my book came out with Grace from the Ivory. And then I just did my last event at Rooted Coffee Shop in Walnut Creek, which is in the downtown area where I live. And that was co-hosted with Heather Anderson of the club and the Mamahood. And it was just a beautiful celebration of community and connection and gathering. And both of these events were so my vibe, so my style, from the women who were co-hosting and interviewing me and bringing their beautiful communities into the space, but also the physical space and environment of just, you see all the photos on Instagram and on my blog post, but I just love gathering in person and having soulful conversations with people. It's basically like doing a podcast interview, but not alone, sitting in my office, by myself and talking to a microphone. I get to sit next to someone and be in conversation. I'm having light bulbs go off right now, actually, because I just did a podcast interview with my dear friend, part of my support squad, Nicole Walters, in Los Angeles, and her podcast network is Dear Media. And so they have a studio in LA, and there's a bunch of podcast studios and comfy couches and microphones and video cameras. And I loved that we just got to go in, sit, have a conversation face to face. And there's something about that where you just get, like they call it in Hawaii, chicken skin, where you get goosebumps. There's just something about being in person with people and having conversations. So I'm just putting it out there, my vision, my intention, I would like to do my podcast in person and be in conversation with people. And even more powerful, having these two events celebrating She Builds, is doing it in community, like this beautiful gathering. The first event was over 50 people. We had over 40 people for this event. My husband, George, he was such a trooper. He was the welcome check-in person, greeting people and letting them know where they can get their free wine and their vegan bites, and then being able to just tell them like where to go and what's happening. And it was just so sweet and so special to have him at both of these book release events. And yeah, I just love gathering in community with soulful women and talking about hustle culture and how we can use anti-hustle to be the antidote to burnout. So I'm just so thankful. Like, this has been such a beautiful celebration. And that is my last whoosh of the book launch. Now we're going to let things simmer. That was kind of the pressure cooker of release. And now I get to stay in my pajamas for the rest of the year. And then I'll get back at it in the new year, where I'm planning on doing an event with Mary Cherry at her art studio in Los Angeles, doing a gathering for women in business and talking about the book. And I just want to keep doing more in-person conversations with people. And I love talking about the writing process. I'm an artist first and a business owner second. So as you can see in this season of Lead with Love, I've been talking a lot about the creative process, a lot about book writing. And it's because I am inspired by learning and hearing about other people's creative processes, because it just gives us an opening to different ways that we can be building and creating in the world, and that it doesn't all have to look the same and nothing has to be prescriptive. So anything that I share about my own writing process or unpack from someone else's creative process does not have to be your way, but it can definitely be inspiration. And I love that. Like, I love hearing from people and borrowing those pieces that, ooh, that sounds interesting. And then sometimes I borrow pieces from people, like sit in your chair every day and write every single day at this time and X amount of words. I tried that for 4 months and it didn't work for me. And that's okay. It doesn't mean that it's not going to work for someone else. So I really geek out on listening, reading, learning about other people and their creative process. So that's what I'm doing here, sharing more of my creative process and how I write and create books. So I'm super excited for you to learn more about this. And what I want to say is, I don't want to get into the dip of marketing my book. I want this to be a long, slow burn, that it is just spreading, from hands and hearts to the right people. I also want to celebrate that I was featured in Forbes, and I will link to the article in the show notes at jadaselner.com. But I talk about how to build your entrepreneurial support squad. And Jody Cook was the person that helped write this article. She got really inspired, read my book so quickly, and got inspired by chapter 4, Gather Your Support Squad. And she's like, I wrote this article. What do you think? I'd like to feature it in Forbes. So I just love the synchronicity of that. And you can check out her book that just came out, 10-Year Career by Jody Cook. So that's a huge celebration. I also want you to know that if you have already read the book, I had a friend who came to both book events, and she brought her support squad to the second book event. And she let me know, she was actually the first person to ask a question, because we do an interview with the host for me talking about the book and the concepts inside the book. And then we open it up for Q&A for people to just ask questions. And and she was asking about the sisterhood wound and these pieces, but her name is Isabel, and she launched a children's book with her dad called Daddy Daughter Day. But what's so cool is she, between the 2-week whoosh of getting She Builds out into the world, she finished the book. And it just fills my heart so much. I'm so just excited that people are starting to read and listen. There was someone in Norway who's listening to my audiobook, and it just brings me so much joy. So if you have read the book, like Isabel or my husband who read the book and he was reading it, listening to it at 1.4 or 5x or whatever, then if you've read it or you've listened to it, please take the time to leave a review. It truly, truly, truly helps so much, helps people realize there's some good stuff in between the pages. So head over to shebuilds.com/review and leave a 5-star review if you mean it, and post a pic or a photo, whatever you want to do. The book in the wild, a book selfie with you. I'm all game for it, but I just want your meaningful feedback of how this book is impacting you and to be able to inspire and impact more people. So I'm not going to be afraid to ask. Please leave a review. It truly, truly helps. Now, I want to give you a little bit behind the scenes of AJ Harper, who we're going to get cozy with in just a minute, but a little bit about her. She is an editor and publishing strategist. So she helps authors write transformational books. She helped me. That really enables them to build readership, grow their brand, and make a significant impact on the world. As a ghostwriter and a developmental editor, AJ has worked with hundreds of authors, from newbies to New York Times bestselling authors with millions of books sold. AJ teaches her method in Top 3 Book Workshop. Actually, my good friend Jen Kem, who told me about AJ, we just gush about her all the time, but she's in the Top 3 Book Workshop, and I would have joined that. I just discovered her too late in my writing process, but trust me, I will be reaching out to AJ when I write my next book. She also has the Must Read Editing Workshop. And I just want to share something that's beautiful about AJ is that she's just a phenomenal storyteller. So not only in writing and crafting books, but also she's the head writing coach for Heroic Public Speaking, which is the premier speaker training program created by Michael and Amy Port. They're on my wish list too. And AJ is also the writing partner to business author Mike Michalowicz, who I have also interviewed on my podcast. He's known for Profit First, and they've written many, many more books as well. So you can learn more about AJ at ajharper.com. I know you're going to fall in love with her and listening to this conversation. So let's get cozy with AJ. Hi, AJ.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. And I am so excited to have this conversation. I feel I'm micro fangirling on you, which is a very rare thing for me because I've hung out with Justin Timberlake and Prince and all the people. But when I see someone so in their craft and their body of work, I just get really inspired. So I'm always just inspired and lifted just being in your presence.
Why didn't I know this about Prince?
I know, and you love Prince.
Oh my God, that's an understatement.
Yes, I actually did a podcast conversation. I should send it to you about how I met him and hung out with him. I hung out with him twice, and his last protege was a good friend of mine. So I got to hang out with him when I was 7 months pregnant, hang out in his house, in an elevator with the Prince symbol, all the things. So cool.
I'm super jealous, but that doesn't surprise me. And my very first concert was the Purple Rain tour. I was 11.
Oh.
And I grew up in Minneapolis, so it's pretty much against the law not to be a Prince fan there. But I am a genuine Prince fan for so many reasons. And I actually have this whole theory about how his death broke the space-time continuum, and now we're living in an alternate reality. I really am I'm not serious about that, but it felt like that. For anybody who just loved him, it just felt like There was before he passed and then after, and I'm still not over it. So I would love to hear the podcast.
Yeah. And what I think is really fascinating is how I discovered you was through another fellow Prince lover, which is Jen Kim.
Jen's a Prince fan too?
Yes. She had a whole Purple Rain party at one of her business events, and everyone had to wear purple.
Oh my God.
So I love that we're having a Prince Love Fest in this moment.
Yes.
And I'm so happy that I got to get to know your work through Jen, who's a close friend of mine. She's a part of my support squad, also my neighbor in the San Francisco Bay Area. I feel I manifested her, but she actually first started talking about you when she signed up for heroic speaking. And Jen doesn't, I'm telling you, we just fangirl over here, where she was just like, AJ is amazing, and like messaging and just so with it. And then she told me about your editorial workshops and retreats. And I have gone down the rabbit hole. So I'm excited for more people to get to know your work, because you truly are a practitioner of craft. And also you really invite people to own being a career author. And like you talk about authorship. I'm wondering if you could just define that a little bit, of people who might not know, like, what is authorship and how do you what is a career author?
Thank you. I love Jen, and I'm so honored that you both think so highly of me. It really means a lot to have wonderful creators care about writing great books. And I think, we're in a time, and have been in a time for a while, where people think about writing a book or checking a box or getting a book done, but it's transactional. And they don't think about becoming an author or what it means to be an author. And authorship is, stepping into that author identity and embracing everything about that, and caring so much about your reader and building a readership over time. It's not, let me check this box and get this book done, which there's merit to that. If that's what you want to do, go do you. Absolutely. But to become a career author means becoming an author in terms of identity. And that means not just committing to readers, but it also means committing to craft versus just trying to get one thing done.
I love that. And I'm on this 10-year journey, and I feel like I'm on like year one. It feels like that, of even though I've, written, a recipe book, but writing a nonfiction book and putting the reader first, as you say, is a whole nother commitment and devotion to craft and the practice of writing. And one question that I'd love to ask you before we dive in is, what does leading with love mean to you? And how do you put that into practice in your writing, your business, your life, whatever feels really most alive for you in this moment?
I didn't think about this question in advance. What comes to mind immediately is I'm looking at the people are always doing their very best. And that's how I approach everything. So that, whether it's leadership in my business or leadership with my students, I always think people are doing the very best they can in that moment. And I think that's a loving way to look at things. But more than that, I really believe people can write great books. To me, that's one of the things I can do to lead with love, because there's so much negative programming that people have to overcome to write something wonderful. And I believe they can do it if they just learn craft. So I guess it's two ways that I lead with love.
Well, I want to say, because I've participated in your editorial writing retreat, which I didn't even know that was a thing. To me, I've been defining writing a book as it's not a sprint. We have writing sprints, but it's also not even a marathon. To me, it feels like it's a triathlon where there are many stages. There's the writing, then there's the editing and curating all of the words that you've written. And then there's the next stage of being visible and actually sharing your book to get in front of the readers that you want it to get into. And in your editorial writing retreat, I felt that love and true belief that you believe that people can write really great books that put the reader first. So I just want you to know, as a recipient, I feel that love from how you teach and guide and hold that. And I think that's something important to pay attention to with people that you're partnering with in the book writing process too, of people who are compassionate and actually care and are not so just like meeting the person where they are. And that's what I think that you're saying. Like, I believe you're doing the best that you can, and I'll meet you right where you are in this moment. Mm-hmm. Is there an example of someone or a story where you really felt that was put into practice, where you were meeting someone right where they were and assuming they were doing the best that they could?
Yes. And honestly, it's every day. I have so many stories of people who came in to work with me in workshop who honestly, if you looked at what they submitted initially, you might think, how is this going to turn into a book? Or how can you promise that this is going to be a book that truly delivers on its promise? And some of the people I've worked with had zero confidence about their writing ability. They just had this driving passion to serve. And I have at least one person who was in remedial English, special ed for English growing up, and now has her book in colleges and universities. And that honestly that passion is really important. Having something that you believe in so much that you're willing to go through that triathlon you mentioned to help people and produce something excellent. But ultimately, it's craft that gets you there. And that is almost every day in the work that I do, for sure.
What would be your invitation for someone? One, I would say to buy your book, write a must read, because I literally gift this and mail it. I mailed it to a friend who already had ordered a copy. I was like, then you must give this to someone else. But you talk so much about craft, from the generating ideas from outline into the editing process. And there's just these easy to digest checklist. And I followed everything to a T. So also I probably didn't get everything in because I'm like, I wish I would have met you sooner on my book writing journey. But there is so much goodness in there. But what would you, for someone who's in that phase of authorship where they're like, I just need to get this book out as soon as possible, how you talk about the better business card, that type of, someone's in that urgency. What's your invitation for them to slow down, and where do they go to get in relationship with craft? Like, what does that even mean?
Yeah. So thank you for asking that really important question. Again, no disrespect. If someone has to get a book done because they need it for clients or an event or something, I get it. I just think that it can be very short-sighted. And it's so funny because there's some pocket of this industry that believes that you just get the book out and then you can fix it later, or you'll write the better book on book 2 or 3. And you can't make any money from book sales. So focus on using it for lead gen, clients, speaking engagements, programs. And the thing is that the great book is the book that's the ultimate lead gen. So it's sort of backwards thinking, if you want to raise your profile with a better business card book and just get it done quickly, it does work. I'm not saying it doesn't work. It absolutely works. Any book pretty much does that because people see that in a bio and they assume it's legit and you can move forward. But when you're talking about real change, where your message is affecting people exponentially and getting you where you want to go so much faster, having such a much bigger impact, you need a great book for that. And so my invitation is for people to think more of the idea they had. I think what happens is, look, writing a book is terrifying. I don't know. Did you find it to be that way?
Oh, absolutely. I tried to hire a ghostwriter. Like, I was like, I can't do this.
Oh, no. Yeah. If you told me that, I don't remember, but
yeah, but I knew the editor was like, no, you can write. You just need someone to help you kind of edit. Cause I have a lot of runway in my writing. I have a lot to say and write, but I need to shorten and kind of tighten it up. And so I'm happy that they didn't let me off the hook and just hire someone as a ghostwriter. But that's how hard it felt. Like someone just interview me and just ask me the questions. But that's how we all feel, right? Like it just feels like such a big lift. And also it's a long timeline. I mean, I started working on my book in 2019 and we're at 2022. Like it's an evolution. And that's what I love for you. It's like, let's simmer. Let's be with this work. Let's let it take I think you say it takes the time that it takes, you know?
Yeah. Think about some elements in your book. And I know of some of them. I won't spoil for the listeners.
You can spoil if you want. It's all good.
But I mean, just think about the problems that you solved that you couldn't have solved if you had hurried to get it out. Like, remember the story that you came to? I don't know if it's still in there though. So that's the other thing is I don't know. I don't have the latest iteration, but you were working on how you wanted to close things up.
Yeah.
And you couldn't have gotten there if you were already done months before.
Yeah.
Because it was about something new perspective you had.
Yes, totally. We have to live our book, right? Like there's pieces and also find the book. That to me, it's like, oh, I know the book idea. Oh, I know who it's for. But there's so much more deepening and discovery within that process. And I think having someone like you who's like on the outside pulling, like my conclusion did not exist. There was many iterations and I shifted and changed it just from a beautiful conversation that you and I had together where I was like, and I wrote it in a weekend.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you nailed it. And the thing is that you can nail it in a weekend after all this other time that you allowed yourself to breathe and think about things and make connections. And sometimes we have to take a break from books. And when we write prescriptive nonfiction, we also need to test our theories because if they work for us, they might not work for others. You know, you have a unique skill set and lens through which you see the world, and your reader doesn't necessarily share that with you. So part of it is practicing to see, are these messages landing with people? Can my ideal reader do all these things I'm asking them to do? So when we allow ourselves time to explore it for ourselves and also to test our content and make sure it works for folks, now we have a book that speaks to the reader and is honest to the core. And that's a book that's really hard to put down.
Yeah. And I love that you speak to that testing the content, because even for me as a business coach, and I have tested the content with people who are coaching with me live in real time, but that was one of the huge gifts that I got from you. And if you get the book, so helpful around having beta readers read your book who have actually not worked with you before.
Yeah.
That was an eye opener because I was like, oh, I'll just have like my people that were in my group coaching program, the ones that I created like all of these exercises and was inspired by, but they had all this coaching and context and back and forth with me over a year. Mm-hmm. And so a book reader, so I actually found, and I really followed your process to a T, of finding 16 beta readers, and half were startups who were just kind of dreaming or maybe pivoting into a new business. And then some who were seasoned entrepreneurs. And that was out of coincidence that it was literally half and half, because I think that my book is kind of speaking to the spectrum of entrepreneurship and how we can be starting up, but we can also be restarting up. And just such a gift, that lens of thinking about who has not worked with you before, has not been in a program with you. That was a game changer for me.
Isn't it? It's a simple shift in perspective, right?
Yeah.
How did that go, by the way? Did you make some changes?
Oh, absolutely. It was so helpful to have all of the feedback. I used the questions that you shared and I even had a prep questionnaire for people to fill out to kind of catch their before and then after. And I'm going to save like one of the answers to their questions that I'm like, hey, this would be a great, Amazon review. Yeah. Go ahead and post that, which you suggested. But there's a couple cool things that came from this process. One, someone who read that book, like beta, and like it was in the fugly edition, right? The phase where there was still needed to be line editing. There still needed to be a lot of cuts, but I it was so helpful to do the beta reading right after the developmental, kind of the key developmental editing. One of those readers closed down one of their businesses and reading my book, started a new business, and now they're buying my book in bulk. They have like a subscription box service of like 600 female entrepreneurs that I'm going to be their book club of the month.
What?
January. And it was just like, I didn't know this person. They'd been following me forever. And they signed up to read the book. They read it. They made these pivots, and even in the messiest of messiest drafts.
Yes.
So that was huge of like, not only did you implement and apply things that you were reading, but I'm being gifted to like spread this book. And now she's read it. And so she can be an advocate for the book. So that is just a huge process. And then also catching kind of more of those cultural sensitivity reads as well, of bringing that awareness of like, I see what I'm doing here, and I can change some phrasing and words. So I looked at the beta responses the same way that I would look at the editorial comments from my editor of like creating a list. And I love what you said in the editorial writing retreat was, you don't have to take everything in, like some things you're just going to have to like let go. Do you have I was definitely scared to share my book. Like, when people kind of hoard their book for a long time, like, what are your thoughts around that process? Did you experience that at all, being a seasoned author? I'm just curious, like, do you experience that where you're kind of like, I don't want to share this with anyone quite yet? Or how do you go about that? And how do you coach others through that?
What a good question. So in workshop and in my own life, I don't share anything until I have a pretty good handle on it. And that's not because I'm concerned about criticism. I'm 30 plus years now. So, because I started as a playwright really young while I was still in high school. And so I have a thick skin around criticism. It doesn't mean it doesn't affect me, but I can send my stuff out, I just don't want to do it until I feel that I really know what I'm doing, so that I'm not going to be pushed or swayed in another direction, even from the most well-intentioned person. And that's why for students who aren't as seasoned as I am, I tell them not to share it at all until they have a draft that they feel about 70% happy with. Because people in your world don't have the same frame of reference, the same education. They don't understand how to put a book together. They're probably not your ideal reader. Your cousin isn't, your best friend, etc. And so they don't realize that by saying something that they think is helpful, they're actually moving you in a direction you shouldn't go. And sometimes genuinely hurting your feelings. And they didn't mean to. So I tell my students, please be protective for a while we're in this creative bubble, and let it just be in a safe place to create. And I think there's ways to create those safe spaces among your peers that you trust. But ultimately, I keep it to myself, and I encourage them to keep it to themselves until they feel pretty good about it.
Okay. Well, that's helpful because that's what I did.
Yeah, no, that's a good, get advice from people who are trained in what they do, right?
Yeah. And I think it's interesting because sharing it with beta readers was easier because I knew they needed the book versus what you were saying. Cause I'm like, why am I so scared to share it with my friends? Even Jen Kem, who is a seasoned reader, like she reads entrepreneurial books, business books, all the things. But I'm like, I can't share it with her because she's not the ideal reader for this book, and also has like perspectives and preferences. Like all of my friends have, this person likes to read something that's more light and humorous and memoirish. And this person over here wants practicality and not too much, so I had to be really careful with that because I will be influenced by people who I'm like, but they know me and they know my heart and they know who I'm trying to serve. But it was actually it was easier for me to focus it on who is the ideal reader for this book and have them give feedback, because it's those people that I'm wanting to the people who haven't read all the business books yet. They're just kind of flying by the seat of their pants, trying to lone wolf entrepreneurship. And I want to be that mold for them to kind of break them into, you can get all these these tools and strategies, but through a lens that resonates with where they are in their season of life.
Yes, I'm so glad that you did that. And I understand that it's scary. It's also super interesting, though, right? To get feedback from people who ultimately you're trying to help. And also, if you give it to people that are fans of yours or friends, you really can't honestly trust the feedback. You just can't, because people don't want to say the thing, right? So it's better if you get that feedback from ideal readers, which sounds like it was really helpful for you. But it's important. One little note, if I can.
Yeah.
While I think you should protect your manuscript, right? The actual document, I do think talking about your book, testing ideas, throwing stuff out on social, in your community, talking about the topics, the issues, the problems in a general sense is important to do while you're writing to build community around the topic and build advanced readership, but not to share the actual document.
Yeah, that's a helpful distinction, because I did share behind the scenes, with my newsletter community, sharing those pieces, or I would mastermind and hot seat with my friends and like, hey, can you take a look at this TOC? And gave some great feedback and ideas. But I love that distinction between you can brainstorm and get feedback from your community, from your friends in that way, but not the sacred manuscript. No. Do you have any thoughts around how does someone find the right writing partner, editor that they work with? Because I felt like I had to kiss a lot of frogs in that process and I didn't really learn that that's an important process of almost like interviewing and playing and dating. I don't know. I'm just curious what your thoughts are, because I had someone that gave me feedback on my book proposal and I could just feel like this isn't the right energetic match for me. So I'm just going to close this now. And then the same thing in my editing process where I realized they weren't the right fit to help me kind of cut the words down. And so, I basically, I dated a lot of editors to get to the one that was like the right cadence and momentum and feedback style that really worked well for me.
Well, first of all, kudos to you for doing that. I think a lot of authors just take what they get because they feel they're lucky to have whatever. And we have to advocate for our creative partners, for ourselves, and to get the creative partners that we want. And that's totally acceptable. I think not all editors are capable of doing all things.
Yeah.
Number one, you want an editor that's familiar with your genre. So getting somebody that is usually focused on a different type of book can be problematic because maybe they don't get it, right?
Yeah.
It's good to have a conversation with an editor after they've reviewed a few chapters of your manuscript and, maybe your TOC and your proposal to see, do they get you? Do they understand what you're trying to do? I think that's important. But actually, one of the best tools is knowing your stuff so well. Because what happens is when we don't have our fundamentals down, my ideal reader, my core message, my promise, I know exactly why I chose this outline because it's going to help my reader do X, Y, Z. I have reader feedback, so I know what works and what doesn't. It makes it easier to have those conversations with an editor because you are strong in your conviction about the work you're giving to them. So there's kissing frogs, but then there's also doing your work, right? I want to be bold and ask you, was it easier for you to get what you needed in an editor when you had more clarity and you had feedback and so forth?
Oh, absolutely. Because I was in that place of almost delegating feedback in the beginning stages of like, well, they know better. They're the writer. I don't have a college degree. Who am I? Like there was a lot of, there's the stet, right? Like, and I wouldn't use it as much because I was like, well, they know better than me. They know grammar better than me. They know all of these things, but it took me time to build my own confidence that like, no, I'm going to advocate for this because my readers, I got reader feedback, right? That this is what they said, but it took me a while to build that confidence. In the beginning, I was definitely outsourcing decision-making in the beginning phases. And then I was like, something's not right. And also I'm the expert. And they often say that, but we can kind of talk ourselves out of someone knows better than I do. So I'll just surrender and do what they say.
Sure. And they know a lot. And I am an editor. So I speak from, I've been on that side. And as an editor, I'm always asking for an author to advocate more for themselves and for their stories, and in fiction for their characters, and in nonfiction for their readers. It's always the case that when an author knows more about the book than the editor does, it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
But the problem is we don't actually have as much clarity as we think we do. And it's essential. To me, it's one of the most important things that you can do as an author. And that's why I have that right up front in my book and why I teach it first in my class, because everything hinges on that clarity. It gives you so much confidence to have it because you can talk to an editor. And honestly, if, as an editor, as I am edited by editors, we have a book due in 2 weeks. So I have to deal with my editor at Penguin. And then I am an editor, and I was for a publisher for a number of years as well. Anytime an author says, well, no, it's because this XYZ and this is the deal, I respect that. But when an author doesn't know the answer to the question, do you need this? Why is this here? Then that's where things go left,
Right.
So often it's not even that it's the wrong editor. It could be, but sometimes it's because we aren't strong in our conviction.
Yes. Total. Yes. So what would you say? I mean, I secretly know the answer of for people to get clarity so that they do feel strong and convicted about their book.
Well, when it comes to nonfiction, and even if it's creative nonfiction, this also applies. So memoir or memoir plus, I really think you have to have total clarity about who your reader is. And my stance on this. It's not a marketing avatar, which we tend to lean into. And it's more about what the reader wants and what's standing in their way of getting it. So hearts and minds. And that connects a lot of people. So we tend to get this, we want to write to everyone. And then we choose this super narrow avatar that includes ages and geography and the kind of car people drive and if they have kids and what they think about. And the think about part is interesting and helpful, but the rest doesn't matter because you want a broad enough audience that you can sell a bunch of books and reach a bunch of people, but a specific enough heart and mind connection. So a broad enough audience, but they're connected by what's in their hearts and minds. And you have to get that clarity, and it's tricky because people tend to think about their reader as later in the reader's journey than they really are. It's getting comfortable with understanding where your reader is at this moment, not where you hope they'll be, and how your reader would describe it. How your reader would describe their own obstacles is different than you would because they haven't read your book yet. So they don't actually know all the stuff you know. And they may be wrong and very often are incorrect about what's really going on or what's also going on. And they may not understand some of the lies or myths or issues that they need to get past in order to make progress. And so they might describe a problem one way because they haven't benefited from your knowledge and guidance. So once you understand that, it's much easier to develop a sense of who your reader is. I call it a reader statement. And, it's in my book. But you can also download a worksheet for free. Like I'm super obsessed with people just doing it. I'm trying to make it very accessible to people because to me, it's the number one thing that people don't get right. And yet it's the first thing they have to get right. And if they don't take the time to do it, it's kind of like the house is built on a shaky foundation and then you end up with a teardown.
Yeah. What's the link that they can get the reader statement? This was so helpful for me when I read your book. And also, I won't say easy, but the way that you teach and guide just does make it easier and like quickly to be able to tap into
Yeah.
the hearts and minds of the reader.
Thank you. That's a lot of trial and error, by the way. I mean, it came from being a ghostwriter for a dozen years and having to figure this stuff out, when authors didn't really have answers for me to try and help them get clarity. So this is part of my reader profile worksheet, which is in my book, but it's also for free. You can download it at writeamustread.com. And it's the same tool I use in my workshop. The book is basically my whole workshop. So you can just download that thing for free. Even if you don't read the book, you should be able to get it. You should be able to figure it out.
Yeah. And I love the way that once you have your reader statement, how you can tie that into social media posts. Actually, I'm just like reading mine right now that I wrote last year in August of 2021. And I'm like, oh, right. I need to write a social post. And now I know where to pull it from because that was the note that I took from you of being able to tie that in. And I use that same reader's statement to call in my beta readers. And it's so simple. It's just a few key sentences that are really important of the reader's statement, the core message, the promise, and it's so clear and concise. And I think that's what we're all looking for, the clarity. But the part that we tend to skip over is the thinking. We just want the answer, but we have to do a little thinking and excavating our own heart and mind to connect to the heart and minds of our readers.
For sure. And the reader statement it's just a 4-piece fill in the blank. So it's not complicated at all. And from there, you can get a transformational core message, but you got to start with the reader. And it really helps you. Then when people ask you, what's your book about? You reframe the question and you say, well, it's for, and you fill in the blank with the reader statement.
Yeah.
Yeah. It makes it really easy to talk about your book, use it for marketing, etc.
Love that. And you mentioned ghostwriting, but your name is on your book now. Is Write a Must Read you've co-written with Mike Michalowicz. Were there any other books that have existed as you as the author?
No, we're talking probably 100 books and not all of them super long. So to clarify, right? So some were short books, but no, the only author that claimed me as a co-writer out of so many, I don't even know how many authors, because sometimes I had multiple books for an author, right? Is Mike. And it's not a coincidence he's the only person I still write with today. But that's largely due to a really lovely partnership that I enjoy. But no, don't have my name on anything else. You can sometimes, figure out I might have been involved if you really look closely at acknowledgments. But who knows how I was involved or not. I can never admit it. But this is my first book with my name on it.
So tell me about the difference between co-writing, even ghostwriting other books, to writing your very own book. Like this, you are responsible for all the moving parts. I'm just curious, when did you know it was time to write your very own book where it's just AJ Harper? And also curious if there's any doubts, fears, or insecurities that came up along the way, basically putting you in the seat that all of your fellow authors have been in for so long.
Yeah, I'll just answer that second question. It's 10 times worse for me, I think. I just have to say. It's because the expectation for my book was through the roof. I have so many people in publishing who were waiting for this book to come out and expecting some level of greatness. And that's daunting. Whereas a new author and nobody's paying attention.
Yes.
Right. And they might have some folks who are interested or some clients or fans who are super excited for them. But ultimately, they don't, nobody's really sitting there waiting for them to produce something that's such a huge game changer. And that was daunting. That was really hard. And you mentioned visibility. That's the hardest thing for me. So I actually never intended to write the book. And people have asked me for the past 15 years, when are you going to write a book about writing books? And I said, well, that would be never. Because I don't have an interest in being in the spotlight. I'm not motivated by money. I'm not motivated by accolade. This just doesn't interest me. What I'm motivated by is figuring out how to help an author find their voice and realize their vision. And that drives me and I love it. So, but I decided to answer your first question. I was on vacation with my wife and our family and a bunch of family friends on Madeline Island in Lake Superior. And I remember I was talking with some friends about my students and I just had this total revelation. I thought, oh gosh, I am really making this elitist information that I know could really help folks, but I'm making it so that only a select few ever get to hear this. And the nature of business is, because I only work with 30 students a year, there's a price tag, right? I mean, that's what happens. But I just felt like this isn't right. There are so many people who could access this information. And even if they never talk to me, they could write a better book because of it. And so I thought, oh, dang, I guess I'm going to have to write it because I wanted it to be the information I shared in workshop to be accessible to anybody, even if they couldn't buy the book, they could at least get it from the library.
Yes.
That was my thinking. So that's what inspired me to write it. And then once I made the decision to do it, I thought, oh, you know what? This is actually, if you sell a lot of copies, now maybe you can change the way people think about authorship, at least with prescriptive nonfiction, so that maybe more people want to write better books because they think they can.
Yes, I feel the book is accomplishing that for sure. I took so many notes in my first read through and I'm like, and I have it on Audible. I have the physical print book, all the pieces. What was exciting for you in getting to write your own book? So you had the doubts and the fears around the expectation from people expecting you to write this amazing book, which actually you did accomplish that. Your craft and storytelling and emotion and humor is just, it's so easy to move through and you feel so inspired. I'm like, by page 10, I was like, sign me up. What do I need to do? I'm a career author, all the things, just owning those identities. But what was most fun for you to work on your personal book and project?
Thank you. Every time you say I'm a career author, I just feel a little goosebumps. So that makes me happy. I had lost my voice as a ghostwriter and I was good at becoming other people. And I forgot what I'm all about in terms of how I sound on the page and my own rhythm and pacing. And am I funny or am I not? Am I nurturing? Who am I? What? You lose your sense of self when you write as many books for other people as I have in my career. And honestly, editing, I give my all to that too. So sitting and facing the page, the biggest challenge for me was actually trying to find my voice again. And it was also the part that I enjoyed the most. It was really lovely to finally get there and realize, oh, I remember you. And that was a great feeling. And I've been able to maintain that. That's actually why I write more now to support the book. Where I didn't before. I had a mailing list I almost never emailed, almost never put anything on social, only occasionally. And now I'm more inspired to do it because once you find your voice, then you just want to use it.
I think there's a huge aha moment that's coming, thinking about that for when people get quiet or don't show up or not writing or sharing with their community or their ideal customers, clients, is they don't know their voice anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're in that and you're kind of just hearing all these other external voices, was there anything that you did, even though I know you've been practicing craft and writing, that helped you in this process to find your voice again?
Well, the number one thing is super boring, but you just have to keep showing up and practice writing as often as you can.
Yeah.
I hesitate to say every day because I don't believe you have to. I don't write on weekends, for example, unless I'm on some crazy deadline. But I think it's having a regular writing practice and showing up even when it really feels like sludge, just walking through sludge is actually the answer. because we give up too soon and we become frustrated too soon. And then there's fun things you can try, different writing prompts, just silly things to, manifestos and rants are good. And, anytime you try to find your voice, if you get on the sort of side that's pissed about something, that will actually, help you find it pretty fast.
What would be the prompt for that, for a rant post?
So if you're, for the topic of your book or something you're in your industry, to just say, I wish everyone in my industry would stop doing blank or start doing something. Or I wish this one big myth would stop circulating. And then just go, start talking about what that means. Or just anything you're frustrated that is holding people back or shaping people in a way that isn't helpful.
Yeah.
Or if you say, so much of your book has that in it, actually. Yeah. It doesn't feel like a rant because I don't associate a rant with you, actually. It's not really your vibe. But you do say this thing that we're taught about hustle culture or the way we're supposed to work or sacrifice for work is not only is it not healthy for us, but it's actually not the way to actually grow a business.
Yeah. And that actually, you helped me with that in honing in on the core message. I was kind of using a phrase that I use typically that resonates with people, like building, a business that compromises your health and relationships is not sustainable. And we got to the core and the heart is like hustle culture isn't working for women. Like and that's on the top of the banner on my book sales page and just really on the back of my book description and just owning that prompt of the rant. Like it's not working. It's depleting, exhausting, overwhelming people who take on caregiving responsibilities in many forms of being of service and even anti-hustle, right? That's a very provocative and not a typical like lead with love, but really owning that of like, this is the anti-hustle guide. It is like, we are, this is not sustainable for us to operate and show up in this way. And so I love that invitation of really thinking of what do we want someone or something to stop or start. That's a powerful, just a prompt to play with. I love that. We'll all write our rants.
I think it's a great exercise. And it's also some of the best books and the most successful books are disruptive in that way.
Yeah.
They say it's this, not that, or stop doing this and start doing that. Or this whole thing we believe in is just a pile of what. And those are the books, if you really look at it, that defy convention that are really successful. And I think you do it in such an elegant way that's totally authentic to who you are. And, I believe in a core message that's transformational on its own, meaning I can hear your core message, hustle culture is not working for women. And I can actually make a change even if I don't read your book. Should read your book, but it's powerful enough that I can start to think differently about my own life as a woman. They go, wait a minute, yeah, that's not working for me. And I could start to make a change if I believe that's true. And so that's why your core message is so powerful. And that's what a core message needs to be. It's not a tagline. It's not an elevator pitch. It's not a promise. It's not all these things we think it is. It's just a powerful, fundamental truth that can change a person's life when they hear it. And you have that in your book. But that also makes me want to read the book, right? Oh, that's true. Tell me more. Tell me everything.
Yeah. What is your core message for Write a Must Read?
My core message is a book is not about something. A book is for someone.
I love that one so much. And I feel like our hearts, we beat on the same path of, things don't have to be transactional. They can be transformational through readership, relationships, business, all the things that we can build differently. We can build with love at the core. And I think I just love that shift of like, there's humans on the other side of the pages that are receiving this message, and to connect with them versus talking about something, it's for someone.
Yes. And that also helps you to stay the course with that triathlon, because if you keep reminding yourself, this is for someone, it's for someone, it's for this person, I've made this reader statement, that's who this is for. Reader first, reader first. It helps you get through all those days you don't feel like writing, all those days that you think your idea doesn't have merit, and you think, why am I doing this? Who's going to read this? By coming back to reader, it helps you stay the course. And it also helps you make every decision about your book, literally every decision. Because if you're writing it for someone, all you have to ask is, does this serve my reader? Should I include this story, this idea, this chapter, this action step? Should I talk to this person? Should I use this tone? Should it be short? Should it be long? All of those questions are actually within you, not from an outside source, not based on someone else's expert opinion, but based on what your reader needs from you.
I love that. Does this serve my reader? Yeah. It's so simple and also so profound, and a great reminder for me as I'm in the marketing phase of getting this book out into the world, of needing to remember, like, it's like reader first, not just when you're writing, also when you're editing, also when you're sharing it with the world. As we kind of close up and wrap up, is there anything, because before we started recording, we were talking about marketing the book and not it just being about the crescendo of the launch date, launch week of your book's birthday, but how to make it a more sustainable practice. And I actually saw you doing that, where you were even extending your deliverables and the workshops and things that you were providing. It was like an extended birthday party. You know how some people have like a birthday, then there's birthday month, but I think we're subscribing to the sustainable of like, it's my book's birthday year.
You know what? Can I just say, I know we're close to time, but I have to tell you, this is sort of your doing. I don't think I ever said this to you, and I don't know that I even made this connection, but I'm making it now. I was all caught up in all these things you're supposed to do for a launch. And believe me, I know all the things. And I was really stressed because there was a lot going on in my personal life that was unexpected and required a lot of my attention. And I remembered how you are so just, this is what works for me, this doesn't. I can do this and not that. I'm taking this break. I just so inspired by that. And I canceled a ton of stuff. And I just said, I'm going to do these 3 main things around launch week that are meaningful to me and provide value, and I think will bring me a lot of joy. And then I'm going to space the rest of it out, because I can't do all this in 2 weeks. I'm going to collapse. That's like what you talk about, right?
Yes.
And I took back ownership of it. I swear I canceled so much. And I just took back ownership of the experience. And then I stretched it out over sort of like a book launch summer. My book came out in May, and I kept doing stuff all summer. It was super fun. It didn't require so much of my energy. Now I'm kicking up again to do a bunch more stuff. I think we have to look at authorship and through the lens of what matters to our readers, yes, but what's sustainable for us, just as you said. Because if we don't sustain it, we won't keep selling books and build readership. And there's this dip. There's this dip that happens where you do the big launch, and then you kind of have this letdown phase.
Yeah.
And there's a dip that is what people don't realize is when people are reading.
I love it.
Right? So people are actually reading your book. And so the sales are going to dip a little, right? After a couple months, 3 months. Then that's where a lot of authors just kind of tank it. My book's doing okay, or that was good, and now I'll focus on something else. Problem is, you have to get through the dip and keep marketing through it, because you have to let people read and tell other folks about it. If you write a book that's great, they're going to tell everyone and it'll pick back up. But a lot of people just give up in the dip.
Yeah. I love that you share that. Even my shoulders softened, And I love that I was, an inkling of that sparky inspiration, because I need that reminder in this moment as building up to book launch and all the many ideas. And I love how you were like, I canceled these things. I committed to 3 things. They did a summer, and also looking at the dip is not like a dark, depressive thing, but it's actually a moment of rest so that you can restore and get back there to keep sharing.
Yeah. And guess what people are doing during the dip? They're reading the book that you worked so hard for. So it's a good time. They're just reading,
Yeah, I love that.
Let them read it.
What were the 3 things for you that you chose to do for your expansive summer launch that brought you joy?
Okay, awesome. Thank you for asking. So I had Amanda Krall. She wrote Great Work, which is a wonderful book that you would really love. She said, can I throw you a book baby shower? And she does this book baby shower. Now she does it for other people. But I think I was the first one. And I chose to have a specific group of people there, my students, the people in that network where I teach. And then they all recorded all these videos and cool things that I can use for marketing. And so the gift is that sort of testimonial type thing you can use. And they wrote reviews and that sort of thing. It's a great idea. And it was a way for me to kind of segment off that group. So if you have, say, clients or fans or people you serve, they can have this event, right? Then I had a Monday night reading, which is something I love to do for nonfiction authors because they don't get to do readings. I've had huge authors who've written 10 books and they're New York Times bestsellers that I invite to do this thing, and no one's ever asked them. And so I wanted to do one for myself. And that was beautiful. And to that one, I invited everybody, but I also really made sure my family came. So they weren't at the book baby shower, right? They were at this other thing. So now I have this sort of segmented 3 things, right? Because we all have multiple people in our worlds. It doesn't always work. Like if you've ever been on a Zoom birthday party.
Yes.
And there's people from 10 different areas of your life and nobody knows how to talk to each other. It's kind of like that.
I love it.
I separated and I said, let me get my family and friends to the Monday night reading because they'll love that. It's only an hour,
I watched that reading. It's beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you. And then I did now this is a little extreme. I did go a little long on this, but I did about 4 hours of a live stream, with a great team, Amber Vilhauer's team behind me through all of this, by the way, and my right hand, Laura Stone. I couldn't have done this without any of them. You definitely need a team, but this was great for the live stream. I did what mattered to me. People asked me to get all these influencers to come in, right? And do, which is what we do, right? And then I thought, I just want to provide value. So I actually brought my students in. I didn't even have some of the big deal authors I work with. I didn't have them on my live stream at all. That was on Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn. And it was very quick, 10 minutes, 10 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. I did panel discussions on topics that would be useful to authors. And I also did laser coaching so I could provide value to students that people hadn't even met. And it was so great. And it was so fulfilling and it provided a lot of value. And so that was for more business focus.
Yeah.
So all 3 of those events had crossover audiences where people were at, some people went to all of them, but mostly they were separate, right? And that was within a span of 4 days.
I love it. You're speaking to my soul in so many ways because I have a live stream online book launch party, and I was like, okay, I have so many influencers and connectors and friends. Who am I going to invite? What are we going to talk about? And I was like, I just want my best friend. My best friend who lives in Houston, Texas, can't be with me in person. I want her to co-host this with me and us be in conversation because she was in all the behind the scenes boxers, co-writing sessions, co-working, all the things, that to have just kind of take it all off the pedestal of what all my contemporaries are doing. And it's like, that's not my business model. That's not what I'm doing. Or that's not like, really honoring time and capacity. And I love all three of those parties. And it sounds very similar to actually what I'm doing. And I'm like, am I doing enough? Should I do more? But I'm also like, no,
But you
no.
can do more.
Yes.
Those influencers who are your friends will still be there.
Yeah.
And what happens is I know we're at time, but it actually isn't helpful. So not only is it not helpful for you, but also it doesn't help the book because yes, you need that big push. So, okay, one contrary viewpoint is if you're trying to make New York Times bestseller, you're obviously trying to get as many books sold as possible in a tight time frame. That said, beyond that, it's just about making sure you're always talking about your book at different times. And if everybody's talking at the same time, yes, you can push yourself over on a list, but ultimately that all fades away.
Yeah.
Then now those people aren't talking about it anymore. So I don't know. I just like everything spaced out. Your thing sounds amazing. Talking to your best friend about your book, that's perfect.
Yeah. And I have 2 in-person events. And instead of hosting my own in-person event, I was like, oh, people, like other people can throw the party, like you're saying, the book baby shower, which I love. It's like I can just show up and be there. But I love the video testimonial idea of having, oh, it's so good. It's so good. I love that this has been cyclical of inspiration because I'm inspired by you. You were inspired by me to like cancel, let go, and then spread it out. Spread it out. That all the ideas that you had can come. Is there anything that you would want to share of like, what are your long-term spread out strategies?
Sure. I'm happy to share them. I have a ridiculously high sales goal, and most people just smile at me good naturedly.
Can I hold that vision for you? I'm a very good space holder for vision if you're open to sharing it.
It's an absolutely nutty goal, and I accept that. I want to sell 350,000 copies of Write a Must Read within 10 years. So everybody needs to understand you got to play the long game in publishing. You got to try and sell as many as you can in the first year, but then most of them will come after. And the reason I picked that number is I talked to a bunch of authors to get the number that would be a game changer where I could flip the tables on the industry and people would stop saying, just get your book out there. That there would be a time when people now would say, we don't do that anymore. And so that's my mission. It's totally lofty goal. But if I don't have that goal, I won't find cool things. Like the long-term strategies I have about partnerships with corporations or working with coaches is a big area I want to go deep in. Thinking about, it's really helpful when you set a big sales goal to think about who can help me make the change I want to see in the world. So less about the end consumer and more about who else is reaching these folks and how can we work together. So in my case, colleges, universities, publishers themselves, just thinking really big about how I can get the book out over 10 years. And I invite everybody to think about that, to create a sales goal that's based on the change you want to see in the world. How many books do you have to sell to make that change happen? And who can help you facilitate that change?
Oh, I love that so much. And it allows all the ideas that I have in my dream bank to spread them out because I have all those ideas of different people that I can partner and collaborate with, but it's not going to happen in a 1 week push.
No, it's over time. Go deep into one area and just keep building. And eventually your book reaches a tipping point where it's selling on its own and you don't know why it's happening. And that's because enough people have made it through the dip, are talking about it, and you've made enough inroads into all sorts of different communities, not just your circle of influence, but way outside of the circle. And then your book takes on a life of its own.
Thank you. I am holding the vision. You said your dreams out loud, which I love, the 350,000 in 10 years. So I'm holding the vision. Everyone go buy Write a Must Read so that we can change how books are written because it truly has changed and transformed me. I'm a huge advocate and I just thank you for your time, AJ, and how just generous you are in your wisdom and craft. And I want to continue to keep learning from you. You're so inspiring. Is there any last thoughts or anything that you would like to say before we wrap up? And thank you for the extra minutes to just, I'm sure we could have part 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 and keep these conversations going.
Oh my gosh, that would be the best day if I could just talk to you. The last thing I'll say is that I believe with my every fiber of my being and from personal experience, 17 years in this business, that when you get a book idea, you have the ability to write it. So I just hope that everyone who is listening, when you get that spark of an idea, what if I wrote a book about this? The inner critic comes in so fast to shut you down, but just having the idea is enough. That's enough. And that means you can do it.
Thank you, AJ. It was a delight to be in conversation with you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your heart and attention and listening to Lead with Love. You can always get the links and resources mentioned in each episode over at leadwithlovepodcast.com so that you can build a sustainable business and live a creative life on your terms. If this message, Leading with Love, resonates with you and you want to take a stand for remembering that there are humans with beating hearts behind the numbers, I would love for you to subscribe so you never miss an episode and leave an honest review. It would mean the world to me, and it also helps more people spread more love in the world, which we really, really need. I also love hearing from you. So as you're listening, take a screenshot, share your favorite takeaway, and tag me on Instagram and Facebook at Jada Selner. I really appreciate you, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.